The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Peak Services Lunch and Learn series for leaders. So welcome wherever you are in Queensland, and we've got a very good audience today in this broadcast. So I'm just going to turn off. I'm getting distracted by having that on there. Look, the first thing is I want to make sure I'm being heard, because obviously if I'm talking to myself, it's not good. So could you just in the question box there just type the word clear or something along those lines, so that obviously if I get nothing back. Thank you, Alison. Thank you. Thanks, Debbie. Thanks, John. Thanks, Catherine. Okay, I'm coming across, I assume, loud and clear, which is wonderful. Okay, so for many of you, in fact, I would imagine all of you, this would be your first exposure to Lunch and Learn. So basically, it's 6 one-hour modules, and we meet once a fortnight via this particular process. Now, what will happen is that at the end of this, you will receive an email from me, and in that email will be the slides and also a recording of the presentation. So the good news for you is that you don't have to sit there and take notes or anything like that. You will receive everything that you need at the end of the presentation. So just relax and enjoy. And of course, if you have questions, I would really appreciate them if you type them in as we go. So normally with these sorts of broadcasts, presenters will often wait to the end and there'll be 10 minutes of silence while people get their act together with questions. I think the best way to go is if you've got a question or a comment or a statement or whatever, type it in the question box there on the right-hand side as soon as you think about it. And what will happen is I'll keep an eye out on that, and as soon as I see your question, I'll respond to it immediately. That way you're asking the question when it comes to mind and I can respond to it immediately. That's the best way we can make this interactive. Obviously, I can't unmute you all, because if I did that, we'd get all sorts of sound, background noise and all sorts of things, and it wouldn't work very well. So the best way we can make this interactive is for you to type in your questions as we go. So I think that's about it. Before we move on, most of the housekeeping out of the way, I'm looking forward to working with you, and you'll find that the program is very practical, and you've got my email address in front of you. So basically, in between sessions, in the fortnight between the times we meet, you are most welcome to send me questions or, observations or whatever. So, look at me as your coach as well as the person that's giving you the presentation today and for the subsequent 5 sessions. All right, so let's move on. And what you're going to see in front of you shortly when it comes up on your screen, there it is. Gone again, there it is. So here's the program that we're covering over the 6 modules. I dare say you've seen it before. You certainly would have at the beginning when I sent out the email earlier this week. But nevertheless, you've got, I want to briefly cover each of the modules so that you get an understanding of what we're trying to cover. Because a lot of people say, well, why have you picked these 6 subjects? Why not pick another 6 or whatever? Well, I guess I could probably pick 50 if I needed to, but I think at the end of the day, the assumption being that you're a leader, these are the 6 things that I think are critically important to be successful as a leader in local government, or anywhere for that matter. So I want to cover those and consider them briefly before we launch into Module 1, which is, of course, on the ingredients of effective feedback. So in 2 weeks' time, we will look at enhancing your personal influence. And what I'm going to do, and it won't be this afternoon, but sometime next week, you'll receive an email from me with a link that will give you an opportunity to complete your first of 2 diagnostics online. And this is about the way you like to influence. And you'll find it very interesting. It'll produce a 14-page report. You can print that off. And when you come along for Module 2, I'll be giving a debrief on the influencing capabilities profile. And in particular, what I'm going to be looking at is for ways and means for you to enhance your own influence in the work that you do, irrespective of where it is in local government. We're all in the business of influence. I'm sure you'd agree. And I don't mean by influence, I don't mean manipulation. I really do mean genuine influence. In Module 3, we're going to look at optimizing team performance. And if you've got a team, and which I would suggest would be 2 or more, then your job, as I'm sure you're aware, is to try to get the best out of those people. Easier said than done sometimes, but getting optimal team performance is critically important, particularly in this day and age where there's more project-based work across local government than ever before. So in other words, working in teams is critically important, although hierarchy, as we all know, is still quite it's quite a strong feature of local government still. We have the silos where, one department doesn't talk to another. I'm sure you're familiar with what I'm talking about. In Module 4, we're going to look at getting the very best from the people that you lead. And I'm going to share with you some models and practical frameworks that I'm sure that you'll find very useful to apply in your own workplace. When I say getting the very best from people, I'd argue that that's probably one of your core responsibilities as a leader in local government. And getting the very, very best from people doesn't mean that they're all working at 100%, by the way. That may be unrealistic. But what can we do to get an extra 10% of productivity or focus or whatever it is from the people that we lead? That's the question I want to address in Module 4. So if you can get, say, for example, if you've got 5 people that you're leading, and let's say that we get a 10% improvement in productivity from those 5, that means that overwhelmingly you've got a 50% improvement overall in terms of your team output, and that's significant, obviously. So it's small changes, and we'll look at some of the strategies and ways of doing that in Module 4. In Module 5, we'll be doing the second diagnostic, and I'll send you a link for that. This will be paper-based. I haven't yet got it up electronically, but have plans to do so. And it's about understanding people and their personalities, and it'll give you an opportunity to look at yourself and, some of your strengths and opportunities for growth. And of course, all of us who are leaders have to deal with a variety of different personalities, and we just have to deal with them. And we have to learn to deal with them and understand where they're coming from. And what I'm hoping to do in Module 5 is to give you some guideposts around the personality types. And perhaps then you can have a bit of fun with this and try a few things out in your workplace and come back and tell me how it goes. But essentially, it's about working with and through other people and understanding where they're coming from. And of course, in Module 6, I'm going to be spending the whole hour on facilitating effective meetings. And you might say, well, why have you thrown that in? Well, this is a meeting, electronic meeting, and when we finish this meeting, there might be another meeting you go to and another meeting and another meeting. It never ends, does it? In fact, being very familiar with the local government environment, it just runs on meetings. Now, not all those meetings, of course, you facilitate. So many of those you have to attend, and some of them are mindless and boring and dull and unproductive and all the rest of it. But what Module 6 will do is to help you when you do have to run your meetings to make them more enjoyable, more engaging, more productive. And I'm going to share some ideas with you that I know work in local government. And all you've got to do is be bold enough to go and try some different approaches. And I think you'll find it'll improve the ability because, as I said, our whole world exists around meetings. It's about getting the best from those meetings because they're costly, even though they don't end up in the balance sheet. If you think about it, you've got 5 people multiplied by whatever their hourly or what hourly rate equates to, multiplied by 2, because while they're in the meeting they're not doing something else. It can become a significantly costly exercise. So obviously trying to improve the quality of those meetings becomes critically important. So guys, that's the program, and that's what we'll be covering over the next several months. I'm looking forward to working with you, and throw yourself into it. You'll find that you'll be given homework at the end of each module, and of course starting today. Now that homework is not writing essays or anything like that, of course. The homework will be very practical, so it'll be about you going and trying something in the leadership development space, and then coming back and letting me know how it goes. You can probably guess what your homework is today, knowing full well that it's on effective feedback. I suppose you could probably be confident to suggest that it's going to be something around feedback, and yes, it is. All right, so that's pretty much the program, and there won't be any changes to it. We'll be sticking to that pretty solidly. So let's move into module 1. Now, I just want to make sure, right, no questions, good, no questions, okay, excellent. All right, now what you're looking at here is a very simple diagram, or perhaps I should say graph, which makes a very relevant point about feedback. And I want you to have a think about what it's saying. So you'll notice up the top on the left-hand side, it says receiving strength-based feedback. So when you give strength-based feedback, that is positive feedback, there is a really strong desire that you will engage people. You will. So if you give more positive feedback, you'll find that you'll engage people. Certainly, that's what the survey says. That's what the data says. So that's good news, and it's probably not surprising to you. It's probably just that we're not doing enough of it. Now, if you look at the second graph, blue, of course, is engaged and red is disengaged. If you look at the second graph, or the second one there, you'll see that if people only receive critical feedback, that is negative, albeit constructive feedback, if they only receive negative feedback, there's still a reasonably high level of engagement. So this is the good news for you. So if you're only pulling people up when they don't meet the mark, you point out and you do it in a constructive way, it is still pretty much an engaging exercise. But what's really interesting about this graph is the bottom bar. You'll notice that if you, and this is what the surveys are saying, you'll notice if you give no feedback at all, positive or negative, none, zilch, what will happen is that you will end up disengaging the people that work with you or for you. So what it basically means is any feedback is better than no feedback. So even if it's negative feedback, it is better than no feedback at all, because basically people need feedback. They don't always like it, there's a difference there, but they need it. And your job is to provide it. And your job is to provide it on a regular, consistent and persistent basis. So food for thought. So you can't afford not to give feedback. It's better if you give positive feedback. But if you're going to give feedback at all, any feedback's better than none. That's essentially what that tells us. All right, now let's talk a little bit about feedback a bit further and just consider it for a moment. So here's a little statistic that might interest you. Roughly by a 3-to-1 margin, employees believe that constructive feedback does more to improve their performance than positive feedback. So often we shy away from giving constructive feedback because we're worried about how the person will perceive it. Let them worry about that. I think the most important thing for you to worry about is to make sure that you're giving feedback. So basically, you will get criticised if you don't give feedback. You'll get, in fact, criticised more for not giving feedback than if you give only negative feedback. So you don't have any choice. You've got to give feedback. How you do it, of course, we'll cover in this particular in this particular module as we go through the hour. So the most important point out of all this is that you really need to be giving more feedback. You can never give enough, I don't think. There's always more room, more feedback, and part of your homework will be exactly that. Now, some interesting information about the difference or the connection, if you like, between respect and feedback. Now, here's a statement. The secret of having employees listen to your feedback is whether or not they respect you. Now, this is, you could be giving the word perfect feedback, all the fancy phrases, say it exactly as you want to say it, have good body language and all the rest. If the other person doesn't respect you, and I don't mean as a person, just respect you as a leader, the bottom line is it'll fall on deaf ears. Okay, so respect is critically important. Now, we know that respect is earned and it's incredibly hard to get. It takes a long time to get it. And of course, it doesn't take long to lose it. It only takes one or two critical incidents and you've lost it. And it requires you to be authentic. So I want you to think about that word authenticity. It is really important to bring your real self to work with you and be authentic with people. And part of being authentic, of course, is to let people know where they stand in relation to feedback. Now, this is a bit of a paradox because if people aren't going to listen to your feedback unless they respect you, how do you get respect? And the reality is if you give people feedback, what you're doing is you're getting their respect. So it's kind of like a dog chasing its own tail. It never quite catches it. So the important thing is to be giving feedback and working hard on the notion of being respected as a leader. And this Lunch and Learn series will show you how to do that. And people have got enormous goodwill and they'll tend pretty much to give you that respect if you've earned it. The question, of course, is whether you've earned it. But this is not a license for you not to give feedback. This is a license for you to continue or even increase the amount of feedback that you give. So the reality is, if you gave the same feedback to two people in your team, person A, Fred, and person B, Jenny, and you gave exactly the same feedback, the reality is the two people, Fred and Jenny, would react differently to the feedback. And that would be not because of the feedback, because it's been identical, but a whole lot of other variables, not the least of which is whether or not Fred and Jenny actually respect you. So respect becomes critically important in the whole process. So if people tend to respect you, they will tend to listen to the feedback and hopefully take it on board. So that's something I'd like you to have a think about as we go through today. Guys, if you've got any questions, type them in because, or comments or statements, type them in because I'll deal with them as we go. Okay, so while you're thinking about that, this is a bit of a busy slide, but I want to talk about performance reviews for a period of time. I wrote a book called The End of the Performance Review, so you could probably understand what my thinking is about performance reviews, but I'm not alone. Many people feel very uncomfortable about performance reviews, to put it mildly, all over the world across all sorts of industries, including local government. It's almost like you're obliged to give the performance reviews, and I know we all have fancy names for them in our local government organisations. But nevertheless, we all know what a performance review looks like. And I want to just run through a few interesting figures that I plucked out of other places, and give you a little bit of a insight into what people actually think about performance reviews. Reason being that many people see performance reviews as the ultimate feedback tool. So the once in a year sit down, the event of the performance review is a feedback mechanism. Trouble is, a lot of managers save up all their feedback for the performance review, and then they let the person have it right between the eyes, which isn't very effective. So what do people think about this? Well, 30% of performance reviews actually end up decreasing performance. That's pretty interesting, isn't it? Not increase, decreasing 30%. And in fact, I have yet to come across any research anywhere in the world, anywhere, definitively, that demonstrates that performance reviews actually increase performance, and hence my crusade about getting rid of performance reviews. But nevertheless, I know in local government you're stuck with it. It's what you do in between the performance reviews that's critically important, I believe. 58% of executives believe that their current program doesn't result in performance or engagement. So the majority of people, that is managers at senior level, don't think that the performance review is actually very effective. So that's a bit of a damning statistic, isn't it? 70% of companies are now reconsidering their performance strategy, unsurprisingly, and 70%, so 30% aren't looking at it. That means that there are lots and lots of people out there questioning the way they do things. And I'm sure even in your organisation there's been comments made. Maybe you've done a formal change or brush up on your performance review. Think about where you stand in relation to that. 2/3 of employees with highest performance scores aren't actually the highest performers. Now, the whole notion of ratings is very interesting. Many people use a Likert scale. That's a 5-point scale. 5 means outstanding, 4 is above average, 3 is average, 2 is below average, and 1 is well below average. Many people use the Likert scale, but what we find is that many people on the receiving end of their scores don't believe that they're really objective. They've either been underscored or overscored, and some of the top performers get underscored and vice versa. And I think a lot of the reason for this, of course, is that people don't want to upset people, so they give them sort of ratings of 3 in the middle, so that it doesn't really tell you much. So I think ratings, of course, are pretty much a waste of time, but I also understand you need to do those in local government, and that's just the way the system works, I guess. 6% of companies surveyed think that performance reviews are worthwhile or worth the time. What that really means, of course, is that 94% of people surveyed or companies surveyed think they're a waste of time, which is pretty scary when you think about it. If there's that many companies that think that they're a waste of time, then the future's not bright for the performance review. 2% of HR executives say that the yearly evaluations are useful. Only 2%, which of course means that 98% of people think that they aren't useful. So you can see that this is painting a pretty damning picture of the performance review. 80% of workers are dissatisfied with their performance reviews. 80%. So only 20% of people actually really get something out of it. And 3 to 5% of improvement in performance for all managers believe to be generated in the process. So only 3 to 5% believe that improvements come out of the performance review. So now I'm not saying, because I understand how local government works, I'm not suggesting that this is how do we get rid of this? Probably you're not in a position where you can do much about that. So I'd just suggest go with the flow. but it's what you do in between the performance reviews that become critically important, and that becomes the feedback loop. And and obviously, if you're doing this well, you're doing your feedback well, and you're being consistent and persistent, then it's likely that by the time it comes to the big performance review, that things will go fairly well for you. All right. So anyway, performance reviews. We'll let that pass through the keeper for the moment. Any questions? Aha, we've got a question here, so I will respond to that. Here we go. By respect, and this Alison's asking this question. By respect, do you mean trust? How do you define respect? Yes, I think it is correlated with trust. I think, respect means that they basically, you say what you think, you honour your commitments. Basically, when you give feedback, then people believe that it's coming from the authentic you. That's essentially what I mean. And, we all know people in our own local government careers, I'm sure, who every time they open their mouth, it's quite kind of like, you just don't believe anything they say because everything they've said in the past is nonsense. So if that person was giving you feedback, well, of course you wouldn't respect them or the feedback because everything else they've said hasn't actually rung true for you. So yes, I think you're very right. It is about trust, and I think um, it's look. We all know somebody. It's one of those things. I think, Alison, that we all know people who we would argue is trustworthy. Trying to quantify what that looks like is more difficult, but if you're giving regular, sincere feedback, if you're treating people with dignity, and I mean not thinking but doing, actually doing this, if you are listening to people, if you are, very professional in the way you go about your work, then people will respect you. It's as simple as that. And if they respect you, then they will listen to you and they'll trust that what you're telling them is something that you believe. So that's kind of what I mean by that. But I guess the point is that you should be giving feedback as a means of building trust up. And of course, I'm going to help you with that. So thanks for the question. Keep them rolling. They're great. I appreciate it. Yeah. Thanks, Alison. Yeah, it is about authenticity. Look, what you see is what you get. And I've had nice compliments about that about myself, that what you see is what you get. I don't try to be something that I'm not, nor should you. You just be yourself, and people like that a lot. Right, now let's talk about the complex issue around managing expectations. This is around your expectations that you have of your people. Now, this is not as easy as it might sound. And I want to give you 7 questions that I'd like you to have a think about around this, because I want you to actually think about yourself as I go through these 7 questions. How often do you do these things? Or could you be doing more of them? Or are you doing them effectively? So let's have a look. The first fundamental question that you've got to be able to answer in terms of giving feedback is this. What are your expectations as a leader? Are you absolutely crystal clear about what you expect of other people? Now, you might think you are, but this is not about them knowing. This is just about you knowing. So it's just about do you know where the crossbar is, where the minimum acceptable standard of performance is in all facets of the work that you do. That's an important starting point, because obviously if you don't know that, it does create some problems for you, because it's the starting point, isn't it? The second question, once you have decided on your expectations, is fundamentally, have you communicated those expectations to your team? Now, I know if you go and talk to a lot of team members and you say to them, has your manager communicated with you the expectations that he or she has of you? You'll often get a blank look or no, they haven't or whatever, when in actual fact they have. So what this actually means is that it's not just about communicating it once or twice even, it's being consistent and persistent. I've used that term a few times so far. Consistent means that you are giving the same message to your team, to everyone, you're holding everyone accountable for a specific set of expectations. And of course, persistent means that you continually do that one-on-one in team meetings, wherever. So you can never communicate enough about your expectations, but don't think that you've done enough of that. You haven't, probably, because the truth is, if I went and talked to one of your team members, could they clearly articulate to me what your expectations are? That's an interesting question. The third question that you can then ask yourself is this: do my team member actually understand my expectations? In other words, do they actually understand what they are? Not are they committed to it? This is just, do they understand what those expectations are? Now, just because you've communicated them doesn't mean they understand them. So you have to be very specific about how you communicate those to people so that they actually understand what those expectations are. Very important. So it's one thing to understand them, and it's quite another thing to accept them. So do your team members accept them? So do they believe that they're too unrealistic? Do they believe they're out of reach? If they believe those things, then it's likely that they're not going to adhere to achieving your expectations of them. So the next quick key question is, do they accept them? Do they accept them? And probably the best way to find out is to ask them. Be authentic about it. Do you understand exactly what this means? And do you accept them? Right now, there's another question that comes in here, and this is the fifth question. Are my team members committed to meeting those expectations? So it's one thing understanding them, it's another thing accepting them, but it's quite another thing to actually commit to them. All right, so you want people's commitment to those expectations. How do you get it? You ask for it. It's one of the best questions that you can ask is, can I get your commitment that you will follow through on this by the deadline? Now, what you're after, of course, is a nod or a grunt or even a yes, but you want some semblance of commitment. And by getting that commitment, interestingly enough, the person will often be more inclined to commit because they won't want to let you down. And of course, if they do let you down by not committing, then of course you're in a strong position to talk to them about the commitment that they made to you to meet that expectation. All right, so you can see it's a lot more complex, isn't it, than just, communicating to people what you expect, and the rest takes care of itself, not necessarily. So we're up to question 6. So question 6, and this is the heart of what this module's about, is question 6 is around, do my team members know how they're performing against those expectations? Are they clear? Could I walk up to one of your team members and ask them, are they clear about the expectations? Are they clear about how they're performing against the expectations that you've set for them? So this is, of course, about feedback. Regular, persistent, consistent, ongoing, frequent, timely, specific feedback. So if you're doing that and people know, what happens is they get a sense of security because they know where they stand. I mentioned that earlier on in the broadcast. The final question that you've got to be able to answer is, am I supporting my team members to achieve those expectations? Are you removing the barriers that might be in the way, the roadblocks, if you like? Are you doing that? Because there are barriers and roadblocks that get in the way of people meeting expectations. So, for example, if you gave someone, say, feedback on their report and mentioned to them that there were too many mistakes in it, it wasn't proofread, and you really couldn't present it to council on the basis of that. That's your feedback. But then you said, how can I support you more in this process to help you with this? And they said, well, you could talk to Fred in the other department. He's always late getting me the facts and figures for my report, and it leaves me at the end rushing to complete it. Now, that of course could be an excuse, but it could also be a reality that maybe that is a way that you could support that person by talking to Fred and making sure, Fred's boss or whoever it is, and make sure that they know that they have an obligation to get that information to your team member on time so that that team member can in fact complete their part of the report. So, in summary, do you know what you expect of your people? Have you communicated your expectations to your people? Do they actually understand what those expectations are? Do they accept those as reasonable as expectations? Are they committed to meeting those expectations? Do they know how they're performing against those expectations? And are you supporting them as much as you possibly can to meet those expectations? So I'd like you to have a think about that. It's a complex area, but it's one that needs to be considered. And I don't, it just means being mindful of that. So guys, if you've got any questions about that, you know what to do. So moving on, what I want to do now is concentrate on some critically important factors that will improve your capacity to give effective feedback. And I'm going to cover about 4 or 5, and I'm going to suggest and explain to you why they're important. And they're not necessarily in any order, but I just throw up the first one, which is timing. It is critically important when you give the feedback as to how effective the feedback will be. Now, the best time to give feedback is usually after the event, and normally feedback is about some sort of behaviour or a critical incident that has occurred in the workplace. The very best time to give that feedback, both positive and negative, so it could be that they've handled a ratepayer really well on the phone, under a lot of pressure as a customer service officer, and you want to give them that feedback, the best time to do that is immediately they get off the phone. Why? Well, the sooner you do it, the more you're likely to have an impact on its effectiveness, because the other person is obviously aware that by giving them feedback immediately after an event, you obviously think it's critically important, and that's why you're doing it. So obviously that will make a difference. Now, consider it the other way. Let's say that you're having a performance review and 6 months ago you did see that this person managed somebody on the phone really effectively. Imagine if you then said in that performance review, I forgot to mention, or I didn't mention it to you 6 months ago, but you really managed that very difficult ratepayer extremely well on the phone. Now, I guess it's better than nothing, but probably in the mind of the other person, they're probably thinking, well, if it was that great, I wonder why you couldn't have said something at the time. So in other words, what happens is it's not quite as effective as it may or could have been, because you've left 6 months between that. I've just got another question here. Here we go. Going back to the beginning. All right. So, yep, I've done that one. Respect. Thank you. Yep. Should both parties uh, discuss and agree on expectations as part of the relationship building performance setting? Yeah, look, I think so. I actually think so, Alison. I mean, at the end of the day, there are some things in local government that are non-negotiable. I mean, there are regulatory requirements, health and safety requirements, and so forth. So there's some things that just have to be done, and that's fair enough. But look, I think it's a good thing on those things where there is some flexibility, yes, because it builds up a rapport. So, yeah, good question. If it's one way, that is the leader's expectations, then what could be problematic, couldn't it? Yeah, absolutely. If it's just your view of the world, look, it's best to get people involved. Look, there are some things where I think it's critically important that you have your own view and you share that. Um, but look, there are other things that are negotiable, and I think you've just got to use your common sense. But I don't think there's anything wrong with you setting expectations that are non-negotiable. But I think it is a good thing to get people involved in some of those expectations. So I agree with you. So good comment. So get people involved in that discussion is a good way to go, and you could do that one-on-one or also from a team perspective. All right, moving on. So timing's critically important. It's the first attribute. The second attribute, of course, is being very specific in your feedback, and that means not generalizing your feedback. I hear too much generalized feedback, and it doesn't go over very well. So be specific. Let me explain that a bit further for you. Okay, now coming up on your screen in a minute, there we go, is a little bit of feedback. Imagine if you said this to someone in a meeting or after a meeting. You said to them, overall, good job on the presentation at this morning's meeting, but it could have been better. And you spun on your heels and you're out of there. That was your feedback. Now, the person's probably thinking to themselves, what was so good about it? Because they might be very self-critical, and they might also be thinking, um, well, what does she mean by it could be better? I mean, I'd like to know, really. I mean, you might be prepared to ask, but you might also be blindsided. So it's too vague. What's wrong with it? What didn't she like about it? So it actually raises more questions than answers. So that's too vague. Let's try this one as a better form of feedback, and comes up on your screen now. So what about if you said, great job on the presentation. I really liked how you used statistics to back up your key points. One small comment, maybe for next time you could invite more comments from the group to get them more involved or engaged. That's better, isn't it? So in other words, the person's very clear about what you liked about their presentation, and they also know how they might improve. And you notice I've used the word maybe. So, it's up to them ultimately what they do. But interesting enough, when you use words like could, maybe, and so forth, people will have a tendency to do them more than I want you or you must do this. People aren't always open to that. Now, another key point is to make sure that your feedback is regular. Okay, and I'm talking moment by moment, situation by situation, project by project, critical incident by critical incident. You need to be giving regular feedback, and that's the point. Not once in a blue moon, but every single day. And in fact, your homework will be about that. So I really want you now, and I want you to concentrate incidentally on positive feedback, because survey after survey shows us that employees are saying we don't get enough, we don't get enough feedback, but we certainly don't get enough positive feedback. So I'd like you to practice that, and I'll be giving you some homework shortly around that. The thing about feedback that's critically important is that you should ask lots of questions. When you give feedback to people, it's not just you making a big bland statement and then walking away. What I would honestly suggest you do, and I've tried this many times myself and it works really well, is ask people for feedback before you give your feedback. So, for example, if they've had an altercation with someone, and you say, well, how did you think that all went? And then bite your tongue until it bleeds and let the person respond. All right? Because what you're trying to do is to get them to be self-reflective rather than you spoon feeding them with feedback. Ask them what they think. And then, of course, you can add your bits to that once they've given their feedback. You don't have to agree with it, by the way. You might say, well, look, I disagree. I think there are a couple of other things that I was probably more concerned about, right? Because they need to know, remember, what your expectations are. So ask lots of questions during the feedback sessions. There is a saying that says that, we should praise in public and criticize in private. I think that's nonsense. I think all feedback should be done privately. Why? Because I know that there's some people who are naturally shy, naturally introverted, and the last thing they want is a whole lot of attention drawn to them. The fact is that if you're going to say the same thing to a person in private as you would in public, just say it in private. I mean, it's the same words, but you're not putting that added pressure on. And part of it is often so people can see that you're giving positive feedback, and so it's more about you than it is them. So I know it's hard in some local government environments because they're open office, and being open office, every time you open your mouth, everyone else hears what you're going to say. So you need to actually say to people, can I have a word, please? And then obviously move outside, move into a meeting room, wherever you can, and then give that feedback, which might only take 1 or 2 minutes. So I don't know what you think about that, guys, but there's not everyone in the world likes attention drawn to them, and I think it's too risky. You're better off just doing that in private. That's the best way to go. Unless, of course, it might be a full team and you want to explain to them how pleased you were as a team. Obviously, you could do that in public because it's about the team, not necessarily about the individual, but I'd still draw attention to the individual successes one-on-one later on after giving that feedback. Use what we call critical incidents to give feedback. So usually when we give feedback, it's because some behaviours occurred or lack of behaviour in the workplace. So the idea is to latch on to a critical incident or two, and then to use that critical incident to provide feedback. You'll find that works very, very well. So, for example, no, I'll come to that one later. But and it's very hard to it's very hard to argue with a with a critical incident because it's happened. It's real. It's not your imagination. And because it's not your imagination, and because they've been involved in it, it's much easier to use that to give feedback. Okay, now a very important aspect of this is to focus on the future. Some people will want to have a whinge or a whine or complain or point the finger of blame or all the rest of it. What you need to be doing here is focusing on the future. At the end of the day, why are you giving feedback? You're giving feedback because you're trying to modify someone's behavior so that they perform differently next time. Okay, so it's all about that. So politely stop people if they want to have, a blame game or a whinge about something. Say, no, this is all about you, and this is all about what we do in the future. The past's gone. We can't change anything, but what we can do is learn from it and apply it in the future. That's the kind of thing that you can say if you're focusing on the future, which is really important. Okay, now what I want to talk about as we come towards the end of our first module is probably the toughest feedback of all, which is the feedback around poor performance. This is difficult I don't deny that. And what happens is that people avoid it because it's difficult. But I don't know whether you've noticed, but the behaviour doesn't magically improve. You actually have to sit down with people and give feedback. And interestingly, the sooner you do it, the more effective it's likely to be. So my first comment to you is to nip poor performance in the bud, right? The moment you catch somebody not meeting your expectations or the agreed upon expectations of the team, then pull them aside, use privacy, use a critical incident, be specific, explain what it is that needs to be improved, and ask questions before you launch into your own feedback. That's important, and I really would encourage you to do that. Look, I know there are examples of people running off to HR and accusing you of bullying and all the rest of it. And I know that's a pain in the neck, and in a lot of cases, it's not bullying. I get that. But, that shouldn't stop you. Be true to yourself, be authentic. If people aren't meeting your expectations, you need to give them that feedback. They have a responsibility, of course, to deal with it in their own way as well. So here's a couple of tips that might help. The first thing that I'd say that when you've got to have a performance conversation on poor performance, and so you're doing that in private away from the rest of the organisation, the very first thing you should do is get straight to the point. No chit chat, no small talk. This is not a rapport building exercise. This is feedback on poor performance. So get straight to the point. Why? Because the person's obviously sitting there, if they are seated, and they're obviously thinking, what's all this about? And the longer you leave that, the more the tension rises in the room. So get straight to it. Say something along the lines, the reason I want to talk to you about is about the meeting we've just had. Right? I've got straight to the point. So they know that I mean business. Don't have to say it in a hostile way, just get straight to the point. That's important. Giving small talk and all that sort of thing is not putting people at ease because they know that there's more to it than that. So get straight to it. The second key point about difficult meetings around performance is upfront explain the purpose of the meeting. Get straight to the point and explain to them why we are meeting. They need to know. They have a right to know. And you need to be able to articulate what that is. Now, be very careful how you do that. Don't make a generalization. It's no good saying to someone, for example, I want to talk to you about your continuing poor attitude, because you know what's going to happen, don't you? You're going to see that poor attitude on display very shortly because they're not going to appreciate you making labels and generalizations about that. No matter how much you think it's true, it's not appropriate and it's not respectful. So you might say something like, I want to talk to you about the 4 comments that you made in the meeting we've just had. And in particular, I want to talk about the fact that they were all negative when people were raising positive views. Right? Now I've got very specific. And they might dispute it's 4, or it doesn't matter. The point is it was more than once, and the point is that they were all negative, and the point is that they were stifling somebody else coming up with a point of view. And now they might argue back to you and say, oh no, I was just trying to be helpful. Yes, they could say that, but your job is then to say, yes, you probably were. I don't doubt your intentions were honourable, but the reality is, how do you think the other person would have received that? That's the key thing there, isn't it? And of course, what it's doing is stifling the opportunity to be innovative or come up with other suggestions for improvement. So explain the purpose of the meeting clearly. And then once you've done that, what's important for you is to encourage the other person to talk. So you might make a statement like, what did you think? What did you think about that? Or do you want to make a comment about that? Or how do you respond to that? And you sit back in your chair and let them talk. Now, and encourage them to talk. A couple of reasons for that. One is it gives you a chance to think about what to say next. But secondly, it engages them in the conversation. All right. Now, Alison was talking about involving other people. You engage them in the conversation, right? And by encouraging the other person to talk, you're engaging them. Now, here's the thing. Sometimes they will say things in that which are really quite irrelevant or false or even quite, they're out to get a bite. That's point number 4. Please, please bite your tongue until it bleeds. Don't interrupt them. So you've invited them to talk. The job for you is not to interrupt them. So you need to bite your tongue because there might be things that they say that have got your back up and you feel like responding. Do not respond. Let them talk. Now, when they're completed, when they've finished, it's probably likely that you'll want to make a couple of comments. And it's probably likely also that you will want them to listen to those comments and not interrupt you. Now, if you haven't interrupted them, then you're in a position where you can then listen. You can say what you want, and if they do interrupt you, you can say, "Now, just a moment. I gave you a chance to say what you wanted to say. Now, I really appreciate the same opportunity." So you're on the high moral ground there, apart from anything else. And if, of course, somebody says something that's false or you can say once they draw breath, there's just a couple of things that I'd like to touch on that you mentioned there, and then talk about them. But don't do it while they're in mid-sentence and while they're in, giving their explanation. If you do those 4 things, there's a good chance that you're off on a good footing. Here are a couple of other things that you might like to think about in relation to giving feedback in those difficult performance conversations. This is not an argument. This is not about you getting an argument, or they might think it's an argument, but it's not an argument, right? So there's 2 tactics that might help you with this. One of those tactics is that you just say to the other person, "I refuse to argue with you about this." Now, if you refuse to argue with someone about something, there isn't an argument because it takes 2 to have an argument. So you just keep your cool, take a deep breath and just say, "I'm not arguing with you about this." The second thing you can do is, if it's a relatively minor point, you can say, "Well, you know what, let's just agree to disagree." So you neutralize the disagreement to say, "Let's just agree to disagree." And that works fine. So this is not about arguing. This is not what a performance conversation is all about. The important thing, of course, is to focus on the performance, not the person. So it's critically important you do that and make sure you do that well. It's important that you focus on the future because it's about changing behaviour, as I said earlier. It's important that you also encourage them to let them know that you believe in their ability to be able to make the necessary changes that they need to. And it's also finally important for you to seek out any causes, because often the issue is not the issue. By talking to them, you'll find that there are some other issues involved that need to be dealt with. All right, so hopefully those things will help you. And what I want to do now is finish up, and thank you very much for the questions, but I've got homework for you. Sorry, guys, but I want you to make a commitment to give feedback 3 times a day next week. Now, you know what's good news? It's Friday afternoon in local government land. You can start this afternoon. All right, so I want you to give 3 bits of feedback every single day for a week and see what happens. Now, I'd like you to focus on positive feedback. Now you might say, oh, well, I can't think of anything that's gone well this afternoon. My suggestion is that you probably haven't looked hard enough, because there's always positive things going on. It's just that you probably haven't looked at them, probably haven't focused on them. So could you do that for me, please? And by all means, email me back and tell me how you go. I'll be very interested to know how you go on that. All right, so that's homework. And if you think you'll forget, then write a little note on your computer, or you know, on your hand, or just write the word, or a notice board, feedback. Just write the word feedback times 3, and that'll help you remember. So that's homework, guys. And next time we meet, of course, we'll go through module 2, and I'll be sending an email this afternoon with the slides and the recording. And I'll also be sending you a code to complete your influencing capabilities profile. But of course, it won't happen this afternoon. It'll happen sometime next week. All right. So just got a comment here. Thanks, Tim. The course was very informative, especially the tips on poor performance discussions. That's very kind of you. Thank you. I really appreciate that, Judy. All right, guys, that brings us to a close, and thank you. I've enjoyed working with you today, and all the very best in